Werther. Socrates apparently said that the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, we can see from this that both Pip and Deb have lives that were well lived because they were wonderfully examined. And as always, when Deb sets out on something like this, she's made a work of art as well as a presentation. Spike Milligan wrote a memoir which he called Hitler, My Part in His Downfall. My talk, I think, could be titled Hitler, His Part in My Existence. For reasons which I never understood, my parents didn't actually get married till they were 30, despite having grown up on adjoining farms, gone to the same little one-teacher school, and known each other all their lives. But when they did finally get hitched, Mum was pretty keen to set about having a family. But unfortunately, nothing happened. Her local doctors didn't seem to be able to help, but eventually she got to see a European gynecologist who was a refugee from Hitler's Europe, a Hungarian Jew, from what I recall of Mum's story. He correctly diagnosed the polyps in her uterus, removed them, and said, "Go forth and multiply." Unfortunately, Dad was in New Guinea with the army at that stage. But when he came back in 1944, my sister was born in 1945, I followed in 1946, my young brother in 1948, and my baby sister in 1951. And of course, we all went to the same little one-teacher school that both our parents had gone to. Not only did we know everybody, of course, but we were almost all related. I got a bursary to Farrer High School, which was an agricultural boarding school near Tamworth in New South Wales. It was a bit of a shock after being at that little one-teacher school, but I settled in. Farrer was focused on agriculture. It was a 400-acre farm, but it was also academically very good, and in schoolboy rugby league it was outstanding. However, we did also have a bit of culture. Being an all-boys school, of course, it made for a bit of interesting cross-dressing. But this was our cast of Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. I was Algernon Moncrief. I didn't actually have to dress up as a girl, but I had to propose to one of them. Anyway, I finished up with a leaving certificate with first-class honours in biology and a Commonwealth Scholarship, which I took to Sydney University. Sydney Uni was something of a shock from a boy from a little rural all-boys school. There were girls, women, beer, politics, the Vietnam War, conscription. It was all pretty hectic. And unfortunately, on top of that, my dad died in my first year at uni. So I had a pretty, what you might call, irregular undergraduate career. During that time, I shared a house with my lifelong friend Peter Thompson on the end. We were at school together, we were at uni together, and we've stayed close all our lives until he died a couple of years ago. With him is his wife-to-be, Lynn Craigie, a Kamilaroi woman. We also got heavily involved in the Aboriginal politics and the land rights movement at the time. I eventually finished up with a science degree that covered anthropology, geology, zoology, and majoring in botany and genetics. I was very fortunate to get a job as a research assistant with Professor Spencer Smith-White, who was doing a major project on the evolution of Australian arid zone plants. And I spent the next 10 years of my life having a wonderful time at Sydney University. I also met and formed a relationship with Karina, Deb's older sister. And of course, there she is, that's a self-portrait. Karina was a zoologist, an artist, and of course, as you've seen, a magnificent photographer. Our relationship drifted apart, but we stayed friends all the rest of our lives. The first field trip I came on when I was working for Smith-White was a trip to Central Australia collecting plants, and my first visit to Alice Springs in 1969. My memory's a bit vague, but I have this picture of Todd Street still being dirt. No, I'm not sure whether that's true or not. Karina loved taking photos. That's one of hers. Oh, well, I'll say no more. Life in the botany department was great fun, and I'm showing you this picture. This was a footy match between zoology and botany. My friend Peter Thompson playing for zoology down the back there, and I'm getting tackled by the eminent ecologist Professor Charles Birch, who some of you may know. I eventually finished up after that time with a PhD thesis. I finished the thesis on the Friday, had a wonderful farewell party on the Saturday, and on the Sunday with my old mates, we hopped on our motorbikes to ride from Sydney to Dublin. People asked us why Dublin, and of course we said, for a pint of Guinness. Along the way in Nepal, I did a bit of walking in the foothills of the Himalayas. The local guides assured me that people didn't wear raincoats in the storms, it was too humid. Everybody carried umbrellas. And they did. The porters all carried nice British-style black umbrellas. I had this lovely bamboo and waxed paper one that I'd bought in Thailand. The porters all thought it was marvellous. We went on through India, Pakistan. This is the Khyber Pass in Afghanistan. We eventually made it to Dublin, had our Guinness at the brewery, and after a bit more touring around, I spent a winter working in London. that was one of the days I didn't ride my bike to work. A winter in London was an experience, but not one I would care to repeat. I went on to North America and spent 3 months riding around Canada and the States, and then eventually back to Australia. Being broke and looking for a job, I got a position as the officer in charge of Fowler's Gap Research Station north of Broken Hill. It was my first experience as a manager. I had a staff of half a dozen people, and I had the disadvantage of not ever having been there before. But I turned out to have a damn good crew of people, and I soon fitted in pretty well. Despite the isolation, we had regular sort of stream of visitors coming through, and surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, a number of the people from my Fowler's Gap days have finished up in Alice Springs. Will Dobby, who's unfortunately just left, I can never think of Araluen precinct without remembering Will's memorable description in one of his shows. He called it Harry Lewin's Woolshed. Glenn Edwards did his PhD work there. Lynn Day was a visitor with a group of students. Marg Friedel I met at a conference in Broken Hill. And however, Broken Hill wasn't far away, an hour on a fast motorbike, and I got involved with Broken Hill, the motorbike club, the repertory theatre group, and I was even a member of the Broken Hill Club, which was where I liaised with the local pastoral community in my capacity of the head of the research station. I also met a lovely woman called Sonia, who's still a great friend. I'm just about to jump on my motorbike, I think, there and head back to the research station after a weekend in town. You might also notice that I'm clean shaven for one of the rare times in my life. That's because I was required to do that for a part I was playing in a Broken Hill repertory theatre production at the time. It was a musical based on the Steel Rudd stories called On Our Selection. Fortunately, I didn't have to sing. I eventually decided that 5.5 years was long enough at Fowler's Gap, and I resigned and spent the next couple of years doing various things. I did a long motorcycle trip from Sydney to Broome, and coming through Alice Springs I caught up with a few old friends here, including Brian Doolan and Barb Flick. Back in Sydney I got very much involved in the anti-bases campaign, and also did a number of jobs for the Aboriginal Land Council in Western New South Wales, working on land claims and land purchasing and land management. In 1987, I got a call from my friend Peter Thompson, who was living in Wilcannia at the time. A pastoral property owned by the Aboriginal community, Winterriga Station, had fallen into a hole. The Aboriginal man managing it had died on the station. The apprentices had left. The sheep were in dire straits, And of course the unfortunate story had hit the newspapers. I was called in and spent 3 months trying to get the place back onto its feet while they found a permanent manager. Hardest 3 months' work I've ever done in my life, I think. I show you this picture because this is the biggest river red gum tree I've ever seen on the banks of the Darling River, just behind the old Witchetty homestead. On my last day at Witchetty, I had a telephone call from Marcia Langton, who was working at Central Land Council at the time, asking me if I was interested in applying for a job. And I still remember, it reminds me of how much things have changed in the last 37 years. My telephone number at the station was Nelia 1G, a party line. No mobile phones. So anyway, I was offered the job and moved to Alice to work at CLC, and I formed a relationship with local Dr. Robin McDermott. We bought a house together in the east side, and then after 3 years Robin was offered a job in the Philippines working at a refugee camp, and I resigned from the Land Council and went with her. We're only going for 1 year, but we finished up staying for 2. When we came back, I was doing some land management work, mostly with Aboriginal organisations. And then John Howard was elected. All the funding was cut off, and there wasn't much work on the horizon, so I got into tourism. I blame John Howard. Robin moved on. She's now an emeritus professor. And I started my own little company, Trek Larapinta, doing walking tours on the Larapinta Trail. I was also fairly much involved in things that were happening in Alice Springs. I got very involved with the Labor Party, the Angela Pamela situation. If you can't read that, it says, "Our stringent safeguards ensure that our uranium is used for peaceful purposes only," which must be one of the bigger lies that anyone's told. And then when I was walking on the Larapinta Trail, Deb turned up. She was coming to Central Australia. Big sister Karina said, "Oh, you should go for a walk on the trail with Charlie." And she's still here. I think Deb covered the trail activities fairly well, but our objective was to show people as much of the country as they could see, not see how fast we could walk. Here we're looking at some mica in the rocks, wildlife, central netted dragon, I think. After 10 years I was getting a bit jaded and managed to sell Trek Larapinta and pass on the business to Shane Futrell. And Deb, having already tried out some artist camps, decided that that was going to be a viable business. So we became Larapinta Creative Camps. We had a wonderful life for the next 14 years, meeting some marvellous people, camping out under the stars in beautiful locations all over Central Australia. But it was damned hard work, as well as being very satisfying. One of the unexpected things was that, of course, I became a de facto grandfather. This is Deb's first grandson, Zeus. Something that was new to me, not having had any children of my own. And number 2 grandson, Cassius. They're now 14 and 12. And it's been a joy in my life having our grandchildren. And whenever they've come to Central Australia, of course, we've gone out camping. And the boys have visited quite a lot. As soon as Cassius was 6 years old, the minimum for travelling unaccompanied, they would fly out and spend some of the school holidays with us here in Central Australia. But only working our camps and our walking tours in the cooler part of the year has also meant that we've had a lot of time for our own adventures and of course a lot of time for Deb's artwork. We've taken advantage of our magnificent location here to see a lot of Western Australia. And boy, is there a lot of Western Australia. We've been to Ningaloo, Karragini, Rudall River, Kalbarri National Park, a boat trip around the Abrolhos Islands, the southwest. One of our favourite roads is from here through Kintore and Coonawarrachi and across to Marble Bar, what's sometimes called the Garry Junction Track. And we've been backwards and forwards on that one a few times. But we haven't ignored the rest of the country. We've been to Tassie and, there we are, with Conrad Ratter on one of our favourite places on the art camps. Us enjoying Ruby Gap, and one of our favourite camps at Running Waters, big clay pan at the back of at this time with a lot of water in it. We volunteered for Tasmanian National Parks at Melaleuca in the middle of the southwest wilderness area of Tassie. Spent a marvellous 6 weeks there. And this is the biggest shell midden I have ever seen. Those people certainly made the best of their shellfish resources. We also managed a couple of trips to the Kimberley. This one's on a boat trip around the coast on a 15-metre catamaran with only 8 people on board. And that's a tasseled wobbegong shark coming right up to the boat. You could reach in the water and sort of pat it as it went by. We also, amongst the wonderful people that we met, were Madeline and Bertil Leidner from Sweden. They first came to Central Australia and hired us to take them around for a week. They were such lovely people. We became really good friends, and they came back to Central Australia several times over the last few years, and we've always gone out camping. We've been to Ruby Gap and Roma Gorge, and last year we took them down to Dalhousie and the Simpson Desert. They've always been encouraging us to go and visit them in Sweden. And last year in September, there was a Swedish television crew came to Central Australia, and Deb and I got the gig of taking them out camping. Anne and Bill also got to do a segment with them, chatting in the bar at Ross River. They spent a day filming us, and I suppose about 5 minutes of that's likely to finish up on a television program which goes to air in Sweden in August this year. And that was the final impetus to encourage us, and we're going. We're going to visit Bertil and Madeline and be in Sweden when the program goes to air, so we can see ourselves on Swedish television. We're also going to Paris, Ireland and England. Deb has relatives in England. I want to visit the ancestral village in Ireland, and Deb hasn't been to Paris. So, I've tried to cover all of my life. It feels as though I haven't had much time for examination. I feel as though I've just been swept along by it, and here I still am. Thank you.